Hi, everyone. Welcome to the sixth meeting of the Public Policy Task Force. Before we get going, I'd like to start with land acknowledgement. Toronto, or Takaranto, as it was traditionally known, occupies a place that has been home to Indigenous peoples for over 15,000 years. The Huron-Wendat, Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the New Credit River. This territory where I am is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty between the Anishinaabeg, Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share and protect this land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples and settlers from all over the globe have been welcomed into this treaty in a spirit of peace and friendship and respect. Takaranto is now home for many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Recognizing where we stand is one of many intentional acts for acknowledging injustices and committing ourselves individually and collectively as a university to the path of truth and reconciliation. This meeting is the second meeting of our recommendations and priority setting phase, where we are talking about our strengths and gaps and where the university can do more, and trying to learn from external competitors, peers, partners, but also today having a good understanding of what we already do and do well. With that, welcome, and I'll turn it over to Naomi.
Great, welcome everybody. So just one small housekeeping item, and that is to remind you that the team will be monitoring the chat for any questions and are always available to you to assist with any concerns or technical issues. So today we're going to begin by focusing on the internal environmental scan. The scan is a working draft and provides us all with an overview and sampling of some of the key research initiatives and activities across Ryerson, looking at a variety of centers, institutes, and labs that span across multiple disciplines. The second item of focus for today's meeting is the survey that was distributed to the wider Ryerson community during the past 2 weeks. We'll be highlighting some of the key themes and insights generated from the survey results, and are pleased to see the level of engagement we had across the Ryerson community. We'll then move into the larger group discussion and look forward to receiving your feedback, including reflections and observations on the internal scan and survey. This will help identify the ways in which Ryerson can improve its own public policy initiatives, while also highlighting our strengths and things that we can do well, that we do well across the university. So again, we look forward to making the most of this time and this opportunity together. So we'll turn our attention to the internal scan and survey. Natalie Tiwari, a project assistant, and Monica DeRay, our co-op student, will be leading with an overview and summary on the approach of the internal scan and survey, and will provide the key takeaways before we begin our discussion. Over to you, Natalie and Monica.
Hi everyone, my name is Monica DeRay and I'm a co-op student with Ryerson Public Policy Task Force.
And I'm Natalie, I'm the project assistant supporting the task force. We would like to thank you for your time today, and we hope that you were all able to review the internal scan and survey results shared with you earlier this week. We look forward to sharing our key observations and discussing these further after our presentation.
So today we'll begin with a general overview of the key observations we took away from the internal scan, after which we will discuss the results from the survey that was distributed to the wider SRC community. As Naomi mentioned just a few moments ago, we do want to note that the internal scan provided is a working draft, and we will continue to make additions to the document based on feedback that we receive. So our internal scan includes an analysis of the Department of Politics and Administration, along with its key programs and partnerships. The following section provides a full-scale assessment of research centers as defined by Policy 144 and other areas of activity that fall outside of Policy 144, but demonstrate policy relevance. The third section provides a briefer overview of research activities and initiatives across Ryerson that demonstrate policy relevance. And the final section briefly highlights several services across Ryerson that are designed to support outreach for researchers and their work. This includes a variety of services such as knowledge dissemination, government relations, and marketing.
Our first observation relates to knowledge dissemination and knowledge mobilization. Across the different areas of research activities we assessed, we noticed numerous publication outputs and efforts to showcase research in a way that could influence decision makers. These outputs appeared particularly effective when they were regularly updated and covering topics that were innovative and responsive to emerging issues and trends. For example, there was an excellent response across the university to produce useful research for policymakers in relation to the pandemic. Further, some centers and institutes bolstered their research with fact sheets or downloadable materials with infographics to visualize data from their projects. This helps bring elements of practicality and accessibility to their research outputs. In addition, these publications reach a larger audience when they are showcased on social media to heighten engagement or delivered along with events such as conferences, seminars, panel discussions, and workshops. Our next observation pertains to the various initiatives across Ryerson that are interdisciplinary in nature as they feature collaboration with faculty, researchers, and students from different disciplines and backgrounds. Further, some of the interdisciplinary initiatives at the university also feature cross-sector collaborations with external organizations. Some examples of initiatives include interdisciplinary degree programs, projects, partnerships, research collaborations, and events. Overall, these initiatives create an opportunity for research relationships across campus to be strengthened, as well as creative and multi-pronged approaches to be applied to complex issues.
So we also observed that there is a high level of support for students in different capacities across the university. Examples include facilitating student involvement in research activities and outputs, fellowship and research assistant positions, grants and funding to support studies and student research, as well as professional development training and mentorship opportunities. So overall, these initiatives provide students with opportunities for growth and networking through interaction with faculty and external partners, and allow students to gain familiarity with the university's research activities. Strong community involvement and engagement also stood out across the research activities we assessed, which we know has also been identified as a key strength of Ryerson's in previous task force meetings. These community-based projects and initiatives focus on areas such as urban innovation, local policy issues, and city building. And there's a demonstrated effort to continuously connect with local community organizations. And this often involves engaging with marginalized and underrepresented groups. So for example, highlighting the lived experiences of new immigrants and refugees in the city of Toronto. We also observe that there's a strong commitment to initiatives that emphasize social justice and well-being, while seeking to develop bold solutions to new and emerging challenges facing local communities.
Formal and strategic partnerships with various entities, both across Ryerson and external to the university, were also identified. These partnerships united individuals and organizations from different disciplines, faculties, and backgrounds to come together for initiatives such as event series, research projects, and program delivery. Also, partnerships with external entities helped share resources and best practices, support events and publications, generate internship opportunities, and fund key research projects. Across the research activities we assessed, we noted that these strategic partnerships have been established with government at all levels, community-based groups, private sector organizations, other academic institutions, and research centers. We also observed that there is a demonstrated commitment to enhance and promote research activities and initiatives that align with Ryerson's and the SRC's commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. There are numerous research projects and initiatives with the goal or potential to create change for Black, Indigenous, and racialized communities across a variety of fields and disciplines, ranging from fashion studies to urban policy, immigration policy, and environmental sustainability. It is important to note that although Ryerson is conscious of diversity and inclusion, there's still work to be done, though it is hopeful that there's clear evidence across the university that initiatives are being geared towards developing policy solutions and innovations that can support underrepresented and marginalized groups.
Okay, so now we will be moving on to highlighting the survey results. So we will be providing a brief overview and would like to note that further details on feedback we received is contained within the survey results document that was shared with you earlier this week. So the survey generated responses from over 30 individuals within Ryerson's community. This diagram displays the respondents' affiliation to Ryerson, and as you can see, the majority of respondents were faculty members as well as staff and graduate students. So the next slide here shows which faculty, department, or organization respondents were affiliated with. And again, you can see that mostly from Faculty of Arts and the Faculty of Community Services.
So our first question asked respondents to provide what they thought were the best examples of Ryerson's current public policy relevant initiatives. In terms of centers and initiatives, we've listed examples of some that were mentioned multiple times by respondents. These include the Yellowhead Institute, Ryerson Urban Water, City Building, and the Cirque in Migration and Immigration. Initiatives or activities highlighted across Ryerson included training for students, provided, for example, through the MPBA and Immigration and Settlement Studies programs, as well as instances where faculty have been a part of the consultation or advisory process for government policy development. Areas of research strengths highlighted in the survey included urban policy, real estate and city building, water policy, Indigenous affairs, digital humanities, and COVID-19 research. The second question focused on having respondents identify particular public policy engagement and relevant initiatives that have been successful at other universities and have the potential to be adopted here at Ryerson. Some of the Canadian universities initiatives mentioned include York University's Knowledge Mobilization Unit, the McMaster Health Forum, Trent University's Indigenous Council, and the Johnson Choyama Graduate School of Public Policy. Some of the international initiatives and universities suggested included the biannual survey conducted by the University of Michigan Center for Local, State, and Urban Policy, NYU's Furman Center for Real Estate and Urban Policy, and the History and Policy Journal based in the University of London. Some examples of key activities identified by respondents include supporting all faculties, including different races, genders, and underrepresented groups, and supporting and funding non-faculty support staff, as well as implementing better incentive structures and employee retention programs. So this diagram here depicts on what level respondents felt their work was policy relevant. The majority of respondents selected very, and it's important to note that no respondents considered their work to not be policy relevant.
So the next question asked about forms of support currently not available at Ryerson that would enhance public policy engagement. We received a wide variety of feedback in terms of other supports not currently available, and this included public policy training for faculty and staff, as well as increased mentorship opportunities for students. Funding and incentives were also highlighted, including building an incentive structure for research. Other comments included greater recognition for extracurricular public-facing work, financial support to bring in a greater number of guest speakers, and ensuring that funding is distributed equitably and fairly across departments, research centers, and institutes. There was also mention of enhancing cross-disciplinary and cross-sectoral collaboration, enhanced sharing of policy activity across university, and establishing supports and training that could help researchers better share their work with policymakers, government, and media. Capacity was also highlighted as an area of concern that prevents researchers and faculties from actually being able to disseminate the research. So we also heard about support for researchers in translating their more technical research work into actual usable policy relevant ideas. The following question asked respondents to highlight various methods and changes that could be implemented to generate more engagement for undergraduate and graduate students in relation to public policy relevant work. The first category of responses were concerned with establishing experiential learning and training through opportunities such as more diverse co-op positions and interdisciplinary policy training. So our next category focused on increasing student recognition through tools such as social media and public-facing student major research paper projects. Fostering student collaboration was also highlighted through suggestions such as increased opportunities for co-authoring with faculty and student involvement in staff-wide meetings and town halls. Student funding was also another key point raised, particularly through funding student fellowships, more RA positions, student paper prizes, and funding that could increase policy relevant courses and training. Lastly, structural changes were suggested, which touched on fostering better connections between university-based initiatives, departments, and schools with the student experience, as well as implementing more shared governance between students, faculty, and administration. The next question asked about how Ryerson could better anticipate and plan for emerging and disruptive trends. One category focused on improving connections by facilitating collaborative events and fostering better relationships between faculty, government, and surrounding communities. Another category highlighted the importance of research and dissemination techniques through the emphasis of knowledge mobilization, knowledge sharing events, and the use of foresight tools. The final suggestion was related to internal structural changes, such as improved reward and recognition programs and establishing an innovative and disruptive think tank structure that could combine research and enhance our public policy influence. The next question touched upon potential changes in Ryerson's approach to foster more inclusion. So responses touched on student engagement and increasing inclusion for students through more RA positions and opportunities to be involved in research activities, but also fostering an environment where students felt comfortable to lead their own initiatives and ideas. We also received feedback on ensuring there is more diversity and using cluster hiring for management and faculty positions. In terms of outreach, responses touch on proactively seeking collaboration with NGOs and civil society organizations, where we are identifying their needs and seeing where our research could help, and to actively engage with underrepresented groups and communities. Further, we need to think about how we can compensate these groups for their time in order to incent this collaboration. Finally, research was seen as an important tool to foster inclusivity in terms of partnering with Black and Indigenous community partners who are already doing good work and have established their own strong platforms. It was also noted that Ryerson should highlight where inclusivity already exists within the university, but also actively seeking to identify where our gaps are.
The final question required respondents to contemplate how Ryerson could be more effective in influencing public policy. In terms of faculty and funding, it was noted that creating a better incentive structure, helping to increase success in grant applications, as well as integrating non-academic policy experts into existing programs could help in this regard. Several important points were raised in terms of research and influencing public policy. This included learning how to connect research findings to relevant and current policy issues, aligning research with federal and provincial mandates, and assessing how and why we want to influence policy and linking this with Ryerson's values and principles. For outreach, more accessible marketing was noted as being important, as well as engaging more in the consultation process, such as deputations and knowledge sharing. Thank you all for listening. We'll now turn it back to our co-chairs to lead the discussion.
Thanks very much, Natalie and Monica. So thank you, everybody. We have a good chunk of time now. What we are interested in is having a pretty thorough discussion about strengths and how we can amplify those strengths, and whether there are gaps that need to be filled at Ryerson, whether there are things that we think are missing that we should consider. I'm, as people know, relatively new to Ryerson, having been here for about a year, and the internal scan was very informative and educational for me. I know everyone's busy, but if people do have an opportunity to look through all of the material, it is amazing the quality of work, the quality of engagement, the quality of faculty who are engaging in public discussion, activism, public policy, public communication around policy relevant issues and research. So there's an incredible amount of stuff going on here. I'm sure that the internal scan, although it is absolutely excellent, may have missed one or two things, and feel free to flag those for us if you wish. Things that were missed that were certainly not intentional, but there is an incredible amount of stuff going on. So I do think what I'd like to do is, we've had a discussion of the external scan and environment last month. I'd like to treat each of these questions separately, although I do think they'll kind of bleed into each other. Obviously, question 2 is about how we amplify and build on strengths, and then number 3 is about what else we can be doing. So my cunning plan is that we're going to discuss these separately. If I had to bet, I will say they will all bleed into each other and we're going to have one long conversation. But let us at least start with question 1, and I will, look for your hands or shout out if I miss you. But I'd be interested to know what people want to highlight as our strengths. As we'll recall from the external discussion we had, one of the key 6 findings that we arrived at was that the most successful universities make strategic choices about where they are strong and do not try and do everything. So I'd be interested whether there were things that surprised you about the internal scan and what you think our strengths are. Kareem.
Thanks, and thanks to Monica and Natalie for a fantastic presentation. And these kinds of exercises are really, really hard to do. And so I just wanted to commend the work and to answer, in part, I guess, question 1 around leading internal strengths. The discussion, the slide that you had up around what you might, it wasn't so much subject area, but it was more what you might call the Ryerson way of doing public policy and policy engagement. And I'm not sure what number the slide was, but there was a good one that spoke to the community engaged nature of the work and the inclusive practices that that were identified as strengths in that particular slide. So I just wanted to say that resonated with me, and also to Matthew's intro of this conversation just now also resonated as a potential strategic strength that ought to be amplified, to the extent that the work could be work in this space that Ryerson is helping to support could point towards those strengths on that slide around community engagement. I think that is very good.
I'm going to start calling on people if no one raises their hand. Thank you. And I knew I could count on Anna.
No, I was so frightened, Matthew, that I thought I'd better volunteer, like in class. No, thanks, actually, thanks to Monica and Natalie and the whole team, Naomi and Matthew, for this great internal scan and for all the work you've been doing. It didn't surprise me, but I wanted to say something that is probably a common secret, that I think we have a strong city focus, and maybe this should be pulled together. So if you count the times that we have the word urban in front of some things or the word city, I wonder whether we are aware of that, and we could build some more clustering of our areas of strength. I think this is, I have some further comments, but they are for question 2 and 3, so I'll stop here.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that the city focus, and I think is I was looking for you, Charisse. Yeah. So Charisse is here, so she may have views on that. But I think there's no doubt that is a strength. Roxana.
Yeah, well, first of all, again, thank you for this excellent work and for the presentation. And I really wanted to second what Anna is saying there, because I'm, for example, I'm part of Ryerson Urban Water, and there, we have been doing quite a bit of work with regards to policy consultation, at least, and around the Canadian Water Agency, a federal Canadian water agency. And within that, I've talked to people within that realm of water governance and water research as well, really on the natural science side from across Canada. And quite a few of them were basically saying, well, we have a couple of really great water research type facilities in Canada. There's, for example, Aqua in Alberta, which is close to Calgary, which is huge for wastewater treatment. And then there's Ryerson Urban Water when it comes to urban water. And so this is really being acknowledged as where Ryerson is a leading institution in its expertise for all of Canada, and really moving slowly towards this more policy relevance as well. I think this is really something to build on.
And I think that's really important, because one of the things that we talked about earlier is those spaces that build on the intersection of strengths between things that are science-based and more arts or social science-based. And that is one of them where we have both those strengths. Wendy.
Yeah, this is going to sound really parochial, but I'm sort of having trouble understanding, sorry, I've got unstable internet, what the criteria was for deciding what was policy relevant and what wasn't. For example, the Diversity Institute, I mean, we can document a lot of engagement on pretty major public policy things as well as legislation. The Future Skills Center isn't there. I'm just wondering how the definition of public policy was framed, because I would make a case for, lots of the centers that are in faculties that may not be clearly linked to, for example, public policy and the policy and public administration program, although I do teach in that. It seemed to me the definition was a bit narrow and hard to understand, given organizations like the Brookfield Institute are in there, which do exactly the same kind of work as many other academic centers focused on innovation, entrepreneurship, and so on. So how did the determination get made about who was in and who was out?
So I would say that there are not strict criteria, Wendy, and as you can imagine, we went through this, I was thinking, okay, what has been left out here, what has been missed, and I didn't realize the Future Skills Center wasn't there, but obviously we should add something on the Future Skills Center. But the Diversity Institute is there, correct?
No, not as a policy center. It's in the other category.
So, I mean, the difference between those was, I don't think about that they're more policy relevant or less policy relevant. It's just that we couldn't do everything. And there's a technical difference between policy 144 centers, I believe, that Naomi could speak to, but that isn't about which are more policy relevant or less policy relevant. That was just doing a sample and then doing, highlighting that there are lots of others, but that isn't to say that the ones that got the full scan versus the shorter scan were more or less policy relevant. That wasn't the intention.
Okay.
It was just a timing. It was just a timing.
No, don't. I came in late, so I was just looking through the categories, and it struck me as I just didn't understand the categories, so apologies.
100%, it was just a timing, and if we tried to do the full thing, but we wanted to give people a sense of some of the activities going on, so we did a small number and more a deep dive, but it wasn't to in any way suggest that they are doing more policy work than others. That's all. Okay, apologies, but no, I
Future Skills Center I don't see here.
Yeah, Future Skills is in the overview section. Where did I just see it?
Future of Sport Labs.
Oh.
Anyway, no big deal.
Okay.
I withdraw the comment.
Yeah, so as I said, like we're reaching out saying what really needs to be here, what have we missed? So Future Skills Center is something we missed, and we'll add that. And I'll apologize to Pedro.
Oh, no. I mean, I won't tell him.
Shh. Just don't let anyone else know. It's just between you and me, Wendy.
Charisse had her hand up from before. I'm not sure if you wanted to say
Charisse,
something.
then Ron.
Yeah, hi everybody. I apologize. There's some drilling going on in the background. If it's difficult to hear me in a few seconds, it comes and goes. But I have a lot to say, more than I really have time for. But one of the things I wanted to communicate is sort of the difference between what the City Building Institute was and what City Building Ryerson is. And I noted that in the document, it said that CBR is kind of a continuation of CBI, and it's really a completely different animal. I'll start by saying that one of the reasons City Building Ryerson was created is because City Building Institute for 5 years operated as a policy think tank, and we had a staff of policy experts in the area of urban, everything from regional planning to affordable housing to transit investment, kind of in that arena, real estate, et cetera. But we were pretty much operating with external funding and producing public policy research that influenced tons of government policy. We sat on all kinds of task forces and advisory boards for the government, deputations, all those kind of policy things. We were retired in the fall, and one of the reasons CBR was created was to be more academic and build a bigger tent so that we could engage the broader ecosystem of urban academic research at Ryerson, so that it's more than just, say, in like the fields of planning. It's everywhere, and our approach and our goal is to try and bring in the diversity of urban related research in across campus, and our work is to create partnerships to mobilize this knowledge. But we are now at a place where we're no longer doing the public policy research that we did do for years and were very recognized for. So this is a real call out to academics within the university who are working on urban related public policy. We want to support that. We want to mobilize that knowledge. We want to try and match you up with potential funders who would be interested in getting relevant public policy in the urban space out there. So I will stop because there's a lot to say, but I just wanted to explain that distinction. And we're just kind of getting started. So a lot of what we're doing really is under the hood right now.
That's great. Thank you for that clarification, because I think lots of people probably wouldn't know that, and we'll have to make sure we're clear on that. I know, Ronald.
Yeah, just to follow up on kind of what Wendy was commenting on. I mean, I've been in touch with them, and they're aware of this. We've talked about what to do about it. But for example, the PhD in public policy isn't included in the scan, right? So there's lots of things I think that still need to be added here. Actually, one of my concerns is that you're a little cautious in disseminating this around the university. You get different versions, and those become the ones that become the authoritative one. And I think this is a rather incomplete still document that if you start putting it out there in the hands of people, it'll be used as a resource that's missing a lot. I would add, there's other areas I think departments are incredibly underrepresented in here. Now, I can't speak for particular departments, but departments and faculties, a lot of what is being done in the name of policy studies at Ryerson or policy community engagement activities, projects is being done in a way that isn't seen here or noticed here. I cannot believe that there's only one department on Ryerson's campus that in any way connects to policy or has any interaction in the community. So only the Department of Politics is there. I know faculties have everything from visiting scholars to practitioner scholars to specific programs. Faculty of Arts had a pilot project for a year on public scholarship where they funded dozens of master's and PhD students to do different kinds of policy engagement in the community projects. I'm not saying all those things always add up in a way that can say, on an ongoing basis, this is going on, but collectively there is a lot that is missing in here. And I think we have to be aware that these things get used by decision makers, even if they're incomplete. And so there is a real risk to units that are not included here that haven't been, I think in some ways you need to take the draft and put it out there on the Ryerson Research Network or listserv or something and say, look, we're in the process of doing this. We recognize we may have missed things. Please, get in touch with us if you think you belong in here. Or here's the empty form to fill out and submit to us, because we don't want to miss anybody. And I do think we're missing a lot, and I think we have to recognize there could be implications to units that get overlooked.
That's helpful. Thanks, Ron. Samir.
Hi. Yeah, so I'll give an external, because I'm not really in the Ryerson tent other than like being on the board, but kind of having a more external view. It's kind of how, when I started doing my work on policy, I saw a real opportunity to kind of house that at Ryerson. And specifically because what attracted me to the university, kind of having that, kind of 30,000 foot kind of view, at the board level, is this is a university that's innovating like nobody's business. It's seen as that city builder. It's seen as tackling really, really important issues and not necessarily getting bogged down in kind of the esoteric detail that I would feel like other institutions, have been around. And so when you're thinking about, when I was thinking about, well, where could I do innovative public policy research in an ecosystem that would welcome it on aging, as a key issue, Ryerson just has felt right for so many reasons from the beginning. However, I think part of, when you're doing this sort of work as well, you run into the usual infrastructure issues and other things that, you say, okay, what's here that I can use to, to advance the work, and then what's missing as well. I do. One of the things I think I find very challenging, and so I like the comments that have come up to here where, again, this is a great, first scan saying, okay, here are the obvious things that we see. But I think one of the challenges, a lot of people, I think, don't even think about how their work relates to policy. I think when you think about academia and what you're doing to try and get an article published in a paper, you got to fit within this box. You've got to do it. You're on a short cycle or whatever. And often it's about, advancing the research, not necessarily, universities aren't necessarily about advancing policy. And so I often say that when you have, conferences where people do this research, and I'm like, well, what's the so what, right? So you said that you have better cement. That's great, but what does that mean, right? Like, how is this actually impactful on a policy standpoint? Well, this could create longer lasting infrastructure, which creates better housing stock, or what, those sorts of things. So in my long-winded way, I'm trying to say that I do think there's an opportunity here where there's probably a lot of people at Ryerson doing great work that we would say has policy relevance. I don't know if everybody at Ryerson sees how their work is truly policy relevant. And I wonder if there's a mechanism where we could do a bit of a deeper dive to kind of help people say, if you're doing X or Y, like if you think the work you're doing has relevance, kind of at that level, what is it? Tell us what you're doing. Because I think then that helps to kind of feature out or starts to fill out what you have in this listing, because then I think the next steps, are kind of what are the broad themes that, the university says we are a public policy leader. We are focusing on, kind of urban and rural. We're focusing on aging. We're focusing on X. We're thinking on Y, because I think I would hate to look at this list right now and come up with themes when we could be missing other things or missing things that could develop, some other themes. But I do honestly think that from my kind of a bit of an external view, I think Ryerson's, really well positioned to kind of lead this if it says this is the field we're in, but then also kind of having this work tie in with the work that goes on in the day-to-day ground, so that people are not only doing their research, but feeding it into a bigger public policy kind of piece, that people can see how that fits in. So hopefully that was kind of clear on the basis of that, but I appreciate it's been a long day at the hospital.
We appreciate you being with us. Thank you, Samir. Frank.
Thank you, Matthew. I think building on what Samir was just saying, I think when I compared reading the external scan with the internal one, and of course compliments to Chloe and Natalie and Monica for all their hard work, and notwithstanding the adjustments that we'll need to make sure they're complete. When I compare those scans, I think orders of magnitude, I get a pretty clear picture that the Ryerson story in terms of its policy-related ecosystem is a pretty positive one and compares well to peers. And I think, if you look at all the work that's happening across the various departments and faculties and academic and research and other centers, I think there's a strong, as Samir was saying, there's a practical policy lens to it that probably is a competitive advantage and an experiential learning kind of component that probably at least partially has its roots in the Polytechnical Institute aspect of the institution. Now, this is, Matthew, this is where I probably violate your rule of looking at one question independently of the others, but I think it's just natural from that to then look at, for example, the key themes in the environmental, the external scan, and use that as a little bit of yardstick type of thing where we can assess our performance relative to best practices or those themes. And the two that stick out for me that we really should be thinking of where we can improve is that knowledge translation and effective communication tools theme, and also the student involvement and engagement. So that's probably skipping to number 3, but I wanted to put it out there as part of that narrative. Thanks.
Thanks, Frank. I won't hold it against you that you were the first one to violate the rule, but actually you were the first one to acknowledge that you were violating the rule. I think some other people already had, so it's okay. Sung-Yin.
Yeah, I really appreciate the work on the internal scan and survey. I think it took tremendous time to do a full-scale scan, and I'll just mention some observations from the survey results. For example, it's not surprising to see 0% response from Faculty of Engineering and Architecture Science. That's probably reflect the point I mentioned at the very beginning, the lack of participation, from the people from this faculty. I believe this faculty is still the largest faculty in the university, and I'm just wondering if there is any way, as the committee or in whatever format, we can actually approach the dean of the faculty and then to address the importance of participation of this faculty into the whole process through the chair's meeting, and then chair can bring the message to the department or program. That probably help to attract more people to be part of this process. I think, with this largest faculty, if you don't get any response, participation, I don't know how biased the result will be if you look at those survey results. I also want to follow up what Wendy mentioned, that even if you look at, I know, again, full-scale scan is quite time consuming, but I'm looking at the officially, the faculty has 6 centers listed and only 2 actually are included. And at least the other 4 missed. I think 2 of them I can see strong policy relevance, but they are missed. I don't know how this centers actually being picked up for doing the initial scan. And another point, I'm looking at the list, we do have some research labs on the list in the internal scan. Again, this faculty actually has largest number of research labs, not really qualified under that university center category, but I don't know. This is again, we need to look into the aspect of engineering side, and but I think we have a very large number of research labs. I guess most of them are not really active in terms of policy development and participation, but still we should have some labs which are very active, maybe policy relevant. So that probably something we can consider in the future if we have more time to do a more complete scan, look at the reality of the Ryerson, and that will hopefully give us a better complete picture. Thank you.
That's very helpful, and I agree that there may be a need over the next few weeks, and we can take that away to do some targeted reach out to communities engineering or maybe some others that we feel haven't been reflected sufficiently yet in our more general calls. I mean, Naomi and I have shared some of our findings or the outline of what we've been doing with some of the administration at Ryerson. Naomi, you'd know better than I. I think engineering was there, right?
Yeah, it was the SRC leaders group, so the associate deans. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was an opportunity for us a couple of weeks ago to just kind of give people an update on where we were at the task force, and we encouraged all of those associate deans to kind of spread the word and share that the survey was out. Like, this was before the survey closed, and so we asked people to spread the word. We obviously can't make people reply, but likewise we can do more targeted outreach and recognize that we may need to be intentional about connecting with groups that may be underrepresented so far in our consultations. And I would say that engineers might be one of those. I saw Avner, and then Roxanne. Is that a new hand or that's a lagging hand? It's a new hand. So Avner, then Roxana, then Carolyn.
Thanks, Matthew. I mean, I think to follow up on that, I think the law school is missing for me from the policy scan, probably because it's so new. But I think if we're looking towards the years ahead, I hope and I think that it will play a central role in terms of what Ryerson does in terms of policy work on several important issues. I looked at the survey. I don't think anybody from the law school filled out the survey, although I do, to your point, I think an email did go out to faculty members asking them to participate in it, but quickly looking at the survey results again, I don't think that they did. I still would suggest that it would be good to talk to the dean about some of her ideas about how the law school is going to play a policy role, because I think she has some very strong ideas about the policy, sort of issues that she would like to be part of and influence. And so I think as we're developing our own kind of approach, it would be a good idea to sort of have that as part of that. So thanks.
Oh, that makes a great deal of sense. Thank you. Roxana, then Carolyn, then Sean.
Yeah, I just wanted to take this back, particularly with the point that Sung Yan raised with engineering not having participated in the survey, and also obviously the Faculty of Science. I think there were 3 people who responded to the survey, and I know I'm one of them. So, you know, I'm thinking that this actually what was raised before, the point of providing some examples of what would constitute policy relevant in the actual email, in the call to participate in a survey, or a more targeted survey directly really for, for these faculties who now didn't respond necessarily or not much, might really help with that, as was said before, because I think it is absolutely true that I know people in the Faculty of Science and in the Faculty of Engineering who I would argue do policy relevant work, but if you ask them, I'm pretty sure they would not respond to a survey like this, because they would just feel, oh, that's not me. I don't do anything public policy. So I just wanted to highlight or bring that point up again, that I think for particularly these faculties that might be really useful.
Yep, thank you. Carolyn?
Well, I'd like to thank the panel of students and Chloe for putting together the internal scan. I actually learned a lot. I've been here a long time and I read the whole thing. So I encourage everyone, if you haven't had a chance to read it, to read through it, because what struck me is how much there is actually going on. And, you know, we all all kind of have our own little realms in which we know things are going on, but there's just so much fantastic, not only policy facing work, but community based work. And I think that that's another niche, you know, interfacing with the policy realm is one, but Ryerson has really deep connections in community. And I think that's really comes across in the report. The question about how many the strengths, I think there are strengths across so many different layers. The centers and institutes are clearly a strength. The graduate programs, some of the connections that we have through our deputy minister champions, so institutional level strengths, you know, practitioners and public servants and residents. There's so many great assets that we have to build on. And I do think kind of how policy related is defined is really important. So I'm also a member of RUW, and you know, there's some really great science work that comes out of that, and is really policy relevant. So, you know, grad students leading the way on things like flushable wipes, for instance, which, you know, you do a study on that, but then that has real implications for municipal water services. So I think engineering and science folks might not think in those kind of dimensions, but there are definitely some. And Ryerson Urban Water has been a platform to bring some of those kind of more policy dimensions to you know kind of core, what I would call like more core science work. So I do think that there's room to kind of flesh out the internal scan, and I really liked Frank's comments about connecting it to the external scan, because I think in terms of a yardstick, you know, it's really, there's really quite a bit of activity going on. And, you know, in the time that I've been here, more and more student engagement with community, student engagement with public service and policymakers. And in my own research grants, for instance, I know a lot of people have more and more connections with the realm of policy in their own research grants.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Sean, before I go to you, I just want to flag. So we've got probably 20 minutes left, and we can probably, you know, talk for 17 minutes or so, and then, I mean, we can always go 5 or 10 minutes late if, but some people may drop off. So after Sean, I'd like to kind of segue to combining the second and third questions, with apologies to Frank, and that would be about what new things do we think we need to be doing, what gaps that we need to fill, and how are there things that we're currently missing as a university that we should consider, or things that we're doing a little bit of and are strengths but we need to amplify in some way and build upon in some way. So Sean, over to you.
Okay, thanks Matthew. And I think my comment and might cover a few of these questions. So I guess I'm jumping ahead in the agenda. Just an observation, and then maybe I thought I'd maybe articulate an opportunity, which I think is linked to a lot of the strengths that are evident in this scan, even incomplete as it may be. I've been here at Ryerson 5 years now, and I come from the government and the policy world. And one of the things that certainly attracted me to Ryerson was, I think, similar to the comments that Samir made earlier, which was just the perception and the overall level of activity of Ryerson from the outside world, from the policy world, was certainly relative to many of the other universities in the province. This is where a lot of activity was going on. And not only that, but activity that was linked to problem solving and really cracking problems that matter. And I think that's always, you know, universities may look at this from the research output side, but the policymaking world is going to look at it from how can I crack problems that matter or are relevant that you know, in my environment right now. And so I think the opportunity here, and looking at the scan of Ryerson, I mean, Ryerson has strengths in many really relevant policy areas right now. And I think that's why we've been able to, as a collective, been able to get that attention. Where I think the opportunity lies is how to even link that kind of interdisciplinary approach even stronger to the policy capacity. And from the outside world, I think the most valuable set of skills right now in this world is, can you have somebody who has subject matter expertise, knowledge about water, knowledge about urban energy, knowledge about aging, whatever it may be, and then also bring to them, equip that student or whoever it may be with knowledge of how the policy world works, and equipping somebody with those two sets of skill sets and expertise, one more about breadth and one more about depth, I think would really amplify the capacity of Ryerson to, both at the student level, but across the organization, to have an impact in the policy world. And I just see so many opportunities out there to do this. Just take the tech policy space right now. I mean, there's a huge shift going on right now in the technology world, where governments and others are catching up and saying, hey, we need to regulate these large platforms, these large tech companies. But there's so much lack of policy knowledge and capacity in that space that there's this huge gap between those who understand the technology area and those who understand the policy world. Of course, there are people that bridge that gap, but I mean, overall, we have huge shortages. So the more I think but Ryerson, I think, has people who know both of those areas, right? So the more we can kind of, I think, consciously link up the opportunity to policy knowledge and expertise writ large with the subject matter areas and the research strengths that Ryerson has, the more that, I think, becomes a virtuous circle. I'll put a caveat. I'm not the expert on how to do that. I don't run universities or faculties or anything, so I know that's a hard problem, and I don't want to overstate it as low-hanging fruit. But I think if you want to step back from, what the opportunities in front of a task force like ours might be, I would argue that that's one of the strongest and biggest picture opportunities out there. So maybe I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Sean. That's well synthesized, and certainly I think reflects a lot of the comments so far, but puts it quite clearly. Avner, is that a new hand or a lagging hand? I think that's a lagging hand.
The one that I forgot to take off, sorry.
Okay, others? I'm not seeing any hands at the moment, which surprises me. And I will, Josephine.
Hello, I agree with what had been already discussed, that the report actually showed a lot of really amazing strengths. What I really liked was how the internal report also identified all the different chairs, including the social justice chair and all those positions and how it's linked to. I think one way that we can start looking at, because policy analysis and application is actually it's a culture. It's a culture within any institution, any organization. And maybe we need to work with leaders who are actually looking at how we do education and deliver education to actually start fostering that culture about policies. Because I know that when I teach undergraduate and even master level students, sometimes they feel a little bit confused or wonder about, well, what does it have anything to do with me? Because then there is the misconception that only very powerful people can influence policy. And we know that that is not true. So I think that's one area that if we can really do this integration of our research with our education and our policy. And I also really appreciate the report showing that we do have strength working with communities. And that's the area that I feel if we truly want to influence policy in ways that really matters to the lives and wellness of, or fairness for people in our society, then we also need to engage ordinary people in ways that's understandable to them, so that we are all working from the top down and the bottom up, and not really just constantly chasing to go up to the policymakers, when ultimately the policymakers, who they are, depends on who voted them in. So I would like to see a more integrated approach and engage students, especially students from those very creative faculties. I want to get to know them, like media, communication. I think they could really be supporting those of us who are a little bit boring. We write, but then we can't get the message out. That would, I think, really help us and strengthen the way that we go forward. I appreciate the way Samir said, this is why you came to Ryerson. It's nice to know. And so that's what I think we need to tap into.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And certainly the mandate of this task force is about all of the things you mentioned, Josephine. It's not just about influencing powerful people. It's about community engagement. It's about student mobilization and integration. It's about shaping public dialogue and civil society discussion informed with research. So I think we have to make sure we reflect all of that. So I see 3 hands. Are they all new? So I'll say Roxana, Sean, Frank. I think Sean's probably isn't new. So Roxana and Frank, but leave it up there, Sean, if it is new.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you again for these really good comments. I was also looking really at, building from the strengths that we already had and that were identified in the scan, particularly looking at interdisciplinary and cross-faculty graduate programs. So that is really something that resonated with me, being, for example, the Enzyman program being highlighted in there. And what Josephine was just saying, let's, get boring scientists, I could refer to that. I can relate to that. Us boring scientists in touch directly with people from arts, from media, from, to help us communicate our science, to help actually be more, engaging and with that outreach and communication, and actually integrating that already as a resource for students in the education for scientists and for people also from media and so on, to be able to relate these disciplines together and use their combined expertise, knowledge, and creativity to find impactful ways for, policy engagement and communication, science communication. So I think really building on the strength of transdisciplinary graduate schools or graduate courses.
Frank.
Like Roxanne, I wanted to say how important I thought Josephine's comment was about shaking it up and finding ways to really express all the great things that are happening at Ryerson. If you think about the fact that we've got some very well-respected brand names, some of them on the call here today, but for me, there's the missing piece around the student involvement, as I was mentioning earlier, and just translating the knowledge into an effective communications tool. So as an example, when I think of the marketing area as an example, so, if you go, some institutions, they offer student marketing agencies where they get associated with clients. So if we take our strength of being connected to communities and we could work in student kind of approach that's more structured than we have it now, where they could be attached to community groups, and then the community groups as credible external parties would have their own voice after whatever it is they get done with a student-led team, and that would amplify the voice of what the university does, just as an example. But I thought what was said was really, really important about needing to shake it up a bit in translating what we're able to create within the organization. Thank you.
Thanks. So I have 2 more, and I think unless someone has something urgent to add, we'll wrap it up with Sanjay and then Ope. And clearly, and Naomi will highlight this at the end as well, over the next couple of weeks, if people have other things that they really want to highlight as opportunities, as strengths, as gaps that need to be filled, they can certainly communicate with us through email or set up a call or something. Sanjay.
Thanks. Thanks, Monica and Natalie, for sharing the overview of the scan. It was really, I didn't get a chance to read it through thoroughly, but I scanned it. and like, as everyone said, there's a lot going on. I was just wondering, without I don't want this to come across as pedantic in any way, but I was just listening to the conversation, and I think the question that was raised right at the beginning is, is this does this research, this work have policy relevance? Is an important question. And in this conversation and previous ones that we've had, we've also talked about community engagement. And we've talked, there's a term that we haven't really used, but it's one that gained a lot of currency in the States, at least in the circles that I used to work in and move in, which is called public scholarship, right? So there's an idea that there is scholarship which has clear public relevance, and it is written by researchers who are trying to reach a broader audience than simply a community of specialists in the academic world, or maybe outside, but that's narrowly defined. They're writing for each other really to push the boundaries of knowledge, but they're not really trying to reach a broader audience. And I think some of those distinctions, Ron and others have talked about what does the survey capture and what doesn't, and what it might miss. And I think that may be one way of thinking through some of these things when we categorize them, is that some of the research and work that gets done, as Sean was saying, is trying to tackle explicitly, directly, actively a problem, so to speak, however that's defined. And it's trying to advance something. Should we have universal basic income? Something like that. And other times, a lot of research that we do, many people do, in some ways, you imagine a lot of research that happens, certainly in many fields, is going to have a policy relevance, but it's not really problem oriented, right? It might be focused on advancing a certain theoretical debate, or just simply finding out something new empirically that may have a relevance or not. And in other times, I think a lot of the work that happens at Ryerson, I'm really struck by, is this kind of community engagement. It's not really trying to tackle a problem, but it is trying to raise or inform a discussion that is taking place, or actually cultivate a discussion that is not taking place, and raising awareness about things. I was thinking about, for instance, somebody who I work with, I don't think it was on the scan, it wouldn't have been captured because it's not policy focused. Thinking about the work that the Democratic Engagement Exchange does, that John Beebe leads. There's so much community engagement there, and student activism and so on, but it's not policy focused, right? But it is trying to, it could be, but the thing is, it's about engaging civic organizations and community partners. So I think when we sort of look at everything that's being done at the university, it might help, just a suggestion, to think about these types of categories. And I think, I can't remember who mentioned it, sort of Venn diagrams. There's one about themes that may be important. The other one might be the types of work that we do, the vehicles that are used to pursue them. I think that might be something. And I'll just add one last thing, and I'll just say this statement, is that we talk about things that maybe we don't focus on. I mean, it's very striking. We talked about this last time, is how much of what we're trying to create, or what we do, focuses on things that are happening elsewhere, internationally, versus what's happening in Canada. And I think that's a big question we have to return to. To say, if a strategic question is you want to focus on certain strengths, that has implications for those of us who mostly work in other parts of the world, or in trying to think of comparative research and comparative policy work. So just, you asked about that, so I thought it's worth just sort of mentioning, something for us to revisit.
Those are all very helpful, and the last comment is noted. Opie.
I'm going to be very quick. Just flowing from Sanjay's comment about the vehicles of activity, I think that's very critical. A lot of the sort of focus has been on research, and I just wanted to highlight the role that teaching might play, specifically the Center for Teaching and Learning, or Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. And one of the ways by which we might be able to encourage a more policy focus that would, engage students, as a lot of people have suggested, is to figure out ways by which that can be incorporated into curriculum. And I think that center might be a great place to get that work done. And so if there were to be some kind of collaborative effort with the center, I think that that we might be able to get more traction. I think it's a recommendation that I would stand fully behind, especially because they provide a lot of support to faculty, especially new faculty, and create sort of like a focus for them to sort of think about as they're designing their courses and delivering them. So that's something I wanted to highlight that would cut across both faculty and students and address a few of the concerns that people have.
Thank you so much, Opie. I think we're kind of right on time. I'll turn it over to Naomi to give you a little bit of a map of what's coming next.
Great, thank you, Matthew, and thank you everyone so much for such stimulating discussion and comments and commentary that we will be taking back and adding to the document and to our review. So thank you again so much for that. So as I think we've mentioned before, our next meeting is coming up just a week after we originally had it booked. You'll be getting an amended calendar invitation for the next meeting, which is going to be held on Thursday, April 29th. And as I said, we'll get you the calendar invitation for all of that. That will be actually our final meeting, and where we'll be focusing on solidifying, our priority setting and recommendations to determine where Ryerson can fill gaps and increase its public policy capacity, visibility, partnerships, and impact, as you've presented and discussed so richly with us today. So prior to that meeting, a draft document is going to be circulated for your review. And after the discussion that we'll have at the next meeting, we'll also distribute a post-meeting document for your review prior to our completion of and finalization of it. So just as a reminder, we record each meeting to make this publicly accessible. Edited and condensed recordings are available on the dedicated Public Policy Task Force webpage on the OVPRY website. And as always, if you have any questions or comments between now and the final meeting, anything that you felt you wanted to mention but didn't get a chance to today, things that come back to mind, please get in touch with us. Contact Natalie or Monica on the Public Policy Task Force email, pptf@ryerson.ca. So thank you again so much from all of us for participating in today's productive and vital discussion. And we will look forward to seeing you at the end of April. So thank you all very much. And right on time, that's great. Thank you.